Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Project Review Committee for March 13th, 2024. We're going to go ahead and start Project Review Committee at 1:37 p.m. With that, I'm going to go ahead and do roll call here for city staff. We're joined by myself, Oscar Cepeda, the associate planner with the Community Development Department. We're also joined by Claudia Calderon, the acting Community Development Director. We're also joined by Jeff O'Neill, the city planner. We're joined by Javier Sanchez, the project management and engineering director. We're also joined by James Wickersham, our chief building official. We're also joined by Clayton Dignam, our chief fire marshal. We're also joined by Rob Alvarez from our field services. We're also joined by David Payne from our public works department. We're also joined by Brianna Spry from our field services department. We're also joined by Joe Baeza from our field services department. And we're also joined by Mark Acevedo from our police department. I think that is all from city staff. Yes. Oh, yeah, Sarah Torres also joins us from the engineering department. So with that, we'll start with item number 1, which is a proposed preliminary tentative map. In order to divide an existing 3.12 acre property into 4 parcels and a remainder. There is an existing residence on parcel number 1. And the subject property is located at 1525 North Grand Avenue on the south side of North Grand, just east of Newcomb Street. The property is within the RS2 Low Density Residential Zone District and has a general plan land use of low density residential. With that, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Identifying the proposed preliminary map. As far as comments from the planning side, the project will require to go through a tentative parcel map application. There are fees associated with that. As far as the fees for a tentative parcel map is $1,500. It will require to go through an environmental assessment. Depending on that review, we'll provide the fee associated with the project. As far as the project, it will require parcel map committee, which is a public hearing. After and if the tentative map is approved, it will require to also process a final map. As far as standards, development standards for that zone district, it does require minimum lots to be at 6,000 square feet, meet a minimum of 60 feet in width, and not more than a minimum of 75 feet in length. The length of the parcels cannot be more than 2.5 times of that width. Also, there is standards for lots to front a street.
They have to front the street?
That is a requirement as far as the development standards for new created lots to front a street. However, the development code does have a mechanism to vary regulations if it meets certain findings, to delineate from certain design standards for lots. We'll provide those requirements, as part of the, project's letter. If that is something that, would be, allowable. And that is pretty much the preliminary comments from planning in relation to the map.
Do you need an environmental?
We could possibly make a, preliminary determination, for an exemption, under a code section, 15332, which is an infill project. It looks like it could meet those findings. We'll run it by the environmental coordinator just to confirm that. But that looks like
How
to
long
be,
did that take?
with the letter that we'll be mailing out in about 2 weeks from today's meeting, we'll highlight,
If I can get,
that review.
okay, if I can get away with one, oh, with one, okay.
Thank you. With that, we'll pass it along with our engineering department with Javier.
All right, thanks, Oscar. For engineering, rather than the access easement, we will require a street to be dedicated. The remainder is large enough in size that there'll be significant or substantial amount of development down there that a street will need to serve all those lots. The 4 created plus the remainder in the future. With that, it'd require offset sidewalks, which on the west side, there needs to be a landscape buffer between back of sidewalk and a fence. So that most likely will trigger an extra 5 feet to be dedicated for landscaping. So 61 feet will be needed for the 56 for right of way, and then 5 more feet for a landscape easement. Regarding drainage, unless the project's planning to contain it on site, there is a potential to connect to the basin that exists south of here. So one or the other will work for. Well, is that the basin? Well, I guess the basin's further down, so. So yeah, one of the two, yeah, that's what we call the K-tip bond. One of the 2 options is available to the applicant. But besides that, water and sewer exists on North Grand there, so that can be tied into and extended. And of course, as each parcel develops, they'll, the improvements can be phased with it. So that's what engineering has.
Thank you, Javier. Next, with our fire department with Clayton.
Essentially for us, it'll be upon development of the proposed lots, all construction shall comply with the latest applicable codes, and it may require fire hydrants, the cul-de-sac turnaround, all that stuff, so, yeah. But I won't have any comments till I know what you want to do there.
Okay.
Thank you. Next with building. Some comments on building. Thank you. Next with Brianna with field services.
I have no comments right now.
Thank you. Next with David.
Also no comments at this time.
Thank you, David. Next with Robert.
No comments.
Thank you, Robert. Next with our police department with Mark.
No comments.
Thank you. Any comments, with Joe?
No comments.
Thank you. Looks like that's gonna be all the departments, comments based off the, preliminary map. As stated previously, we will, provide a letter outlining, today's meeting and the project being proposed in about 2 weeks' time frame. That will outline each department's comments, or condition based off, the presenter project.
2 weeks from today. Okay,
Are there any questions from the, agent?
not right now, just the environmental, but you said you were gonna put that in the,
The letter.
a letter. I'd like to not have to do one.
Thank you, and with that, thank you for the application, and yes, we're looking forward to getting this project moving forward once it conforms with each department's requirements. All right,
Which
thank
one's
you.
next?
Next is gonna be item number 2, which is PRC 2024-010 for Storit. I believe the representatives are joining us online. And Gary, are you here for start? Yeah, we'll start. Right? All right. So again, item number 2, PRC number 2024-010 for Storit. The applicant is requesting a variance for a reduction of setbacks on the street side for J Street. Requesting a minimum of 15 feet for the future development of a new personal storage facility. Let me share my screen. The personal storage facility being proposed at about 157,221 square feet. The personal storage facility will offer storage for individual use and RV storage. The applicant is requesting a variance to change the required setback for industrial zone properties, in this case, general industrial, that requires a minimum of 30 feet setback from property line from J Street. And J Street is considered a arterial, and it is also a requirement for collector streets to have that minimum 30 feet. The project is located on the northeast corner of J Street and Gibbons Avenue. And as stated, it's on general industrial, and it also has a general plan land use of general industrial. Sorry. As far as comments from the planning side, the development code does have a mechanism for a request of a variance, which is outlined in Series 600, specifically Chapter 606. There is also required findings that we would have to meet in order to approve a variance. As far as the required findings, Number one, that there are special circumstances or conditions applicable to the property, such as its size, shape, topography, location, surroundings, or existing structures, which do not apply generally to uses, land, and or structures in the vicinity and the same zone district. Number two, due to special circumstances applicable to this property, strict application of the respective zoning regulation would deprive the property owner of privileges enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district. Number three, special circumstances applicable to the property where or are not self-imposed by the property owner. And number four, that the authorization of the variance will substantially meet the intent and purpose of the zone district in which the subject property is located and will not be detrimental to persons residing or working in the vicinity to adjacent property, to the neighborhood or public welfare in general. Requests for variances will have to go through a public hearing. There are fees associated with a variance, in which we'll provide that information in the letter. The applicant did provide a response in regards to the required findings. With that, will there be any other additional comments from planning from our city planner?
No, we have, as you mentioned, we have the information from the applicant that proposes how the findings could be made. And of course, we'll have further correspondence with them as we get towards hearing, but I mean, based on that information, I don't think planning has any other questions right now. Unless there's anything else, there may be something else from some of the other departments, so you can go ahead and go through that, but I think we're we're in receipt of the information about the findings, and so we'll move forward with that.
Sounds good. Thank you. And with that, we'll pass it along with our engineering department with Javier.
This is just specific to the variance, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, engineering want to have comments on this one.
Thank you, Javier.
Hmm.
Next with our fire department with Clayton.
I don't have any comments on the project.
Thank you. Any comments from our building division with James? No comments. Any comments from our field services department?
No comments from refuse.
No comments.
No comments from street department.
Thank you.
None from water and sewer.
Thank you. Any comments from our police department?
No comments from the police department.
Sounds great. Are there any questions from the applicant at this time, based off the application?
Hey, Oscar, it's Logan. So will we have a chance to be able to discuss with staff a little bit further on our response to the variance findings and have more of a discussion later on, or would now be a time to open up that discussion?
I would say, I think, Logan, this is Jeff. I think what we'll do is we've gone through the information internally, and we'll provide you some direct feedback on that.
Okay, prior to, so the steps moving.
Prior to it showing up in a public hearing.
Okay, yeah, understood. Okay. And what time
Question.
do you think that you guys would get back to us with some direct feedback?
I would imagine within the next week or so.
It'll be outlined in the PRC letter, Logan, in about 2 weeks timeframe.
What's the next soonest public hearing it would?
That would be dependent on, the, items we already have on the, future, agendas. We're looking at possibly,
Mid-April,
I mentioned May.
late, yeah.
We do have meetings the first and third Tuesdays of each month. But due to the fact that we do have, quite a few projects, going to council the next meetings, plus other, items that we're working on, possibly the soonest would be in May.
Is there a limit, Oscar, on how many items can be presented to council at one time?
The situation, it does take, staff's, time to review the projects, provide staff reports, provide,
There's a practical limit as opposed to a regulatory limit or policy-driven limit.
What was that again, Jeff? You're breaking
So I
up.
think rather than there being a policy-driven limit, there's a practical limit. But we'll talk to the city clerk about how things are getting agendized and see what we can figure out.
Okay, yeah, any help with that would be very helpful. I'm sure you guys are aware that, this project is contingent on, several other things happening too with the old site with PUSD. And so our developer, it's not just his eagerness to get moving forward, but it's also other parties that be with PUSD. So waiting, frankly put, waiting till April is not really an option for us. So anything that we can do to move that forward, any help that you need from us or whatever the case is, we definitely need to make that sooner. So.
Okay, well, just as this happens, it cannot be any sooner than April. Because public hearing notices would already have to have gone out. The next meeting is the 19th of March. And then the next meeting after that isn't until April, so.
Understood, okay.
Yeah, so, but like I said, we'll talk to the city clerk about how things are getting scheduled.
Okay, understood, thank you.
I have a question. Is it possible to pull a grading permit as soon as this is resolved? Everything else on site's all pre-engineered. It's all going to be coming through soon after, but we've just got so much time invested in this site plan that it's just killing our schedule. So once this variance is resolved and we have a site grading plan completed and submitted, would that hold up our grading permit?
I don't see why not. I would want to double check with engineering and fire department.
Wouldn't have any problems because the grading is not in.
Well, sometimes the utilities are.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's included in the plan that we approve, I'm worried about.
We would have to have our site underground, of course, and then our site fire. We have fire sprinklers in two buildings.
Yeah.
So we have to have hydrants.
Yeah, and the hydrants need to be on site and functioning before you bring combustible material onto the site to start construction.
Okay. It'd be the first thing to go in, probably their site. So, okay.
Here,
Yeah, as long as the plans go through the review process and get approved, we can do that.
The other topic that came up yesterday, it's come up before, and I've talked to someone about this months ago, and I don't remember who the person was, but that ditch that we have to deal with on Gibbons, taking the water off of it, is a Merino ditch. Have you guys talked to anyone about that?
Mike Knight brought that up.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, we have to. We talked to Tule River. I think they're the one that's kind of working Tule River irrigation, and they hadn't heard about it yet. So I don't know if that's something you guys have to work with them on as well, because they said they needed information from the city in order to make any decisions. But I think they're anxious for us to take that water, but we have to get approval and dump it in the storm drain. So who takes on that? Is that something in planning or?
No, that would be through our Public Works department. Is that right, Javier?
Yeah, it's a mix of engineering and public works. It's most likely the Vandalia Irrigation District.
It's the Campbell Moreland Ditch Company. I think it is the Vandella, that is the jurisdiction. I think you're correct about that.
Okay. Yeah, and just needing to find out what their requirements are for that. You know, if is it do they need to maintain that to continue deliveries downstream? And if so, it may end up being like a pipe and
Yeah.
yeah.
Javier, I'm working with John DeMondon and Kirk Masters with the Lower Tule River Irrigation District that's kind of discussing this or having issues with this. I'm in direct contact with them, so as I know more from them, I'll pass it on to you in Public Works.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, well, thank you. All right, sounds good. Are there any other questions from the applicant or agent on item number 2? If not, again, Logan, we'll try to get this information out to you as soon as possible. And then we'll look at the future scheduling for the next coming up council meetings.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you.
On is it dump in my.
All right, with that, we have moving along to item number 3, which is a resubmittal of a tentative subdivision map for the River Springs. Right.
Just let him watch, he'll be fine. All right, the project is proposing a tentative subdivision map, 72 lots. The subject site located along River Springs Drive between Ecom Street and Beverly Street. The property is situated in a split zone, plan development and parks and recreation. And also has a general plan land use of road into the residential. Sorry. All right, now we got the right one, sorry. So for this one, as stated in previous PRC meetings, the project would require to go through a tentative subdivision map application. It will require an environmental review. The project would require a public hearing, which we have provided that information in previous PRC letters. So those comments won't change.
Oscar, while you're on that part, environmental review. Since this project was previously, or since this property was previously approved as part of the entire neighborhood there in that area, it was approved for 123 units as duplex lots and single family lots in this remaining parcel. Is there any chance that because it was already gone through the process and environmental review that it could be streamlined and not require the environmental review?
Since that original environmental review was, what year was that? Back in 2000. There's been new laws that have been adopted per CEQA and state that would have to reevaluate the project since it has changed. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff? That'll be a yes.
What we can do is take a look at the original environmental document that was prepared, and at a minimum, we can see if it adequately addresses. And again, as Oscar mentioned, there are a number of new changes to CEQA since then that just simply were topical matters that simply were not discussed in environmental documents until the last handful of years. To the extent that we can look at the proposed project as it relates to the same area of the original project, it's conceivable that we could adopt an addendum under CEQA that basically goes through and does a comparative analysis of what was approved versus what's being proposed now, to see if the impacts of this fall within the parameters of the original CEQA document. That's probably the best that we could promise right now.
That's great. At what point would that process begin? Would that begin after we submit for
Yes.
tentative or?
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Certainly.
Thank you. So with that, we'll pass it along with Javier with our engineering division.
And cover one more thing.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
What is typically you're supposed to let a sleeping dog lie, but I know this is going to come up, and that's the density. I know that was in one of the comments before. Previously, under the previous general plan, I don't think we had a what do you call it? A net acreage, a gross, or I guess the gross acreage was everything that was being developed that included streets, but didn't include open space. It didn't include improvements being made to the retention basin and so forth. I think with our acreage, I know that we're probably over the six. Now I also got conflicting. The general plan, I think, says 7.5 units per acre in RS2.
The development code.
I get 7.5 on one and I get 6 on the other. So I'm wondering, if we're 7.5, then we're good. If we're 6, then we're over. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, since I did previously own the retention basin, I guess if I had brought this all in at one time and hadn't sold the retention basin to the city, then it would have all been a part of the gross acreage, but it's not now. So is there anything we can do about that to make sure that the density isn't a something that gives everybody heartburn?
We would evaluate it under the 7.5 net acreage, right, Jeff?
Yes.
So I think we'll be good on that part.
Okay. 7.5 means that we're gonna need approximately 10 acres of property, which including the retention basin would be.
Are you proposing any, affordable housing?
Well, I think all of this is affordable housing. I mean, moderate income at, current household levels is at a level at current interest rates today can afford a $450,000 house. So all of this is gonna be below that.
Well, just for reference, the specific definition of affordability is based on the area median income. And what percentage of those households' income goes towards their rent or mortgage. And I think Oscar asked the question for a very specific reason. So if it qualifies as affordable as defined by the Department of Housing and Community Development, then there are some accommodations that can be made. I think that's what Oscar was getting at.
Well, I may be wrong, Jeff, but I think under the density bonus, it says moderate income units in a condominium or planned use development.
Right.
So it didn't say median, it says moderate.
Right, but what's considered moderate income is based on the area household median income.
Sure, yeah, and I've got the HUD.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying the way that affordability is calculated doesn't really have to do with the price of the house so much as it has to do with the portion of income the households spend on their rent or mortgage. So you're not. I'm just clarifying how.
No, I understand what you're saying. I agree with you totally. I mean, but I've had a mortgage broker tell me, you know, at $100,000 for a family of 4 at moderate income, what can they afford at 6.5% interest?
Yeah. Okay.
And it's, you know, $450,000. So
okay,
I don't anticipate that anything in here is going to probably exceed more than about 350.
And I think that just illustrates how the two distinct ways that we look at it from the city side and you look at it from the home builder side, as far as you obviously have a dollar amount well that your broker gave you, and that's kind of where you're starting your thought process, and ours is kind of like, oh, we're kind of limited to what the state says. So there's anyway same net result, just two different ways of thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I suppose you're absolutely correct. If interest rates went up to 10%, they wouldn't be able to afford $450,000 or $350,000. So
nobody wants that.
No, I don't think we're going to see it either. Biden has assured us of that.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness.
So the density obviously was the other one. The only other thing I can think of that we would probably need as part of the PUD as a variance of would probably be maybe some front yard setbacks and maybe floor area. Because I think it's 45%, and I think we're probably going to be closer to 55 or 60 on the small lots. And I do want to emphasize that lots 1 through 42 will be a part of a planned development where maintenance of streets, front yard, landscaping, everything will be maintained by the homeowner association there. And I appreciate all of the feedback that I got from people like Clayton and others about what we should do, because we revamped this and I think it's a superior product compared to what we came in with the first time. Circulation and if I can point out too, for field services, that the red lines you'll see there are the no parking, and it's on those red lines that we have pads that we are dedicating to each individual homeowner they will have a trash pickup pad that they'll put their trash cans on, and that's where they'll place them. And the red lines are meant to be basically where trash trucks can come in around the outer loop first, and then around the inner loop, and use the pads for with no parking on those red lines.
So not to get too far ahead because it's not my turn yet, but the issue becomes when you paint one side of a fire lane that the fire lane is 20 feet. In a fire lane, there's no stopping, standing, or parking. These are not quite wide enough at 24 feet to have only one side done because the other side doesn't leave enough parking. But if they're not signed and everything, people will because it's human behavior. And so we have the potential for people to then encroach on that fire lane by thinking that, hey, it's not painted over here, I can park.
But we don't really need a fire lane because we have through circulation, right? We don't have dead end circulation like we had before.
But you still have to have that minimum width for us to get apparatus access in there. So that whole thing is still a fire lane, which because you're not going with full-size streets that give you the ability to have 2 lanes of direction and travel and everything, it still is basically just minimally above, 4 feet above what the minimum requirement is to get fire apparatus access in there. And it still has to get in there because of the distance from the actual road.
What would you like to see? I don't know.
At the right now, it would be basically the painting and striping and signage on both sides. On both sides right now. For what I'm looking at, it needs to be on both sides. But because that's a planned unit development, additionally, and some of my previous comments state that, basically it covers anybody with authority can write a ticket for people violating it. But if that's going to be planned unit and have an HOA, I'm going to want them to enforce their own rules first. I'm going to want them to, kind of like we have down here off of 190 and J, the blue oak, black oak, all that down there. Their homeowners association, they have to enforce their rules first. They have to, and then when they have somebody who just isn't compliant and is violating, then we step in and say, okay, hey, look, we send code enforcement down. So, but yeah, so that was what I saw on this one. And then when we get to my turn, I'll talk about the rest, but since we were talking about the red curve.
You could continue with fire department here.
The only other thing that I have is that fire access road going to the south there behind along the river, over up to the east there.
Emergency access?
It's not 10 feet, it's got to be 20. Again, minimum access for fire apparatus is 20 feet.
Well, it's
This is all DG, so instead of 10.
10, it just has to be 20. Yeah, it's the minimum access requirement, and it's open at both ends, correct?
Yeah.
So, okay, then there's no turnaround required there, because we can come in from either direction. And that, again, per appendix D is an all-weather or all-surface road, 75,000 pounds and maintained. That was all that I.
And the fire access road that we put there, basically from a conversation that I had with Mike Knight, was about getting access to not for fire purposes, but for access to the river purposes. So,
and that's fine for them, but if I have to get down there and fight fire and I have to send apparatus down there to fight fire to protect those homes because they're now built that close to it, we're going to put in the minimum. It has to be an approved access at that point. If you're keeping them across the street and I've got a full blown street as a buffer, I'm not so concerned. We can pull up on the street, deploy, do what we need to do. But now I have to get behind them to protect them.
Thank you. Next with engineering with Javier.
Can I ask that refuse goal first?
what?
Yes.
You're gonna put me on the spot. Okay, I do have a question about these trash pads, how much space is allowed, or how much space do you have built in to separate the cans? Because right now we need to have about 4 feet of space between each can to be able to service them.
How wide are the cans?
About 3 feet wide at the biggest or the widest, 2.5, 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2.5 is what I measured.
Yeah,
So I'm trying to think, I know with me and my neighbor, we park our cans, like less than a foot away from each other, and it doesn't seem to be a problem, so I'm not really sure where the 4 feet came from or where that is, because that's certainly not
that's usually our standard, just because
Mhm.
we get some of those, like the more dense spaces, they'll pack their cans so close to each other, we can't get the grips in there to service them. So we would just need to be sure that there's enough space in there for us to be able to get the grips from the truck.
So we're showing 10 feet for 3 cans, which is about 3.5 feet per can. Can is 2.5 feet. So we would just need to increase those another couple of feet. I'm gonna push back on 4 feet in between. That's I mean, you guys can, your trash guys can maneuver better than that.
And then my next question, so it would just be the one color can that would come out for the day of service, right? There wouldn't be all 3 colors
That's
out there.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. Unless you guys change to Visalia or something like that and do everything in one section of town on the same day, that would be the only way it would change.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You still have a question for?
No, she answered it.
Thank you, Brianna. Next with Javier.
All right, thanks, Oscar. Yeah, I just wanted to hear from both fire and refuse before, because engineering's comments somewhat tie into them, and with this project changing quite a bit, just wanted to make sure that I didn't trump something that they would need. And so in listening to what both departments said for engineering, I guess there's just a couple items that create some, or that still, this layout still creates issues with, and that although everything's labeled as private drive on this area here, private roads and alleys will need a CUP to be approved by council. But even then, our code states that private roads shall still meet city standards. And
Javier, I'm sorry, that leads me to one other thing, and thank you for bringing that up. So for the private drive, we would also need a release of liability to service anything on there, stating that we are not responsible for any damage to the road.
Yeah, like I say, I refer back to the idea that it'll be under an HOA PUD where everything will be maintained. Nothing is dedicated to the city that is north of River Springs in this section. Private water, private sewer, private roads. Very similar to what we did at Garden Court Villas over there off of West Roby, just west or just east of Matthew, when we did the 8-pack and the 6-pack designs, where everything was maintained off of Roby. just deeper and with wider roads. The access roads there were only 20 feet. And there was no red line on those.
Yeah, no, and I see that, and you know, obviously there's a development that happened northwest of town that had this 5-pack concept. And so I think in all cases, the access was, or the amount of units accessing a certain area were limited and everything was blocked off. But with this all interlinked, you know, I think we can allow a limited number of reduced width drives, but there's still a need for a city standard width street through here.
Well, that's the purpose of of the PUD zoning, correct? To establish a procedure for development of large lots and land in order to reduce or eliminate the rigidity, delays, and conflicts that otherwise would result from application of zoning standards and procedures designed primarily for small lots. So that's what we're doing. (20701A). 207.06 required findings F says the proposed development provides a more efficient use of land and superior architecture and site design compared to that which would be achieved through the application of the zoning district regulations that otherwise would apply. And as you alluded to, 207.05A, second sentence says the PD plan shall be accepted and processed concurrently in the same manner as a conditional use permit. So I think that covers what you mentioned.
Well, but we still have the dilemma of 407.03 A10, which states private roads shall be constructed to city standards. Again, it is about trying to find a balance on all this. I'd say at a minimum, some backbone through here, which, you know, I can see the outer road being that, you know, going up through there, all across there, and then down. If that would meet city standards, then I think it would relieve a lot of concern that not just from engineering, but from a fire and refuse standpoint, that they can properly access this development.
Hey Javier, if per se we did that, could we still leave the internals as the 24?
With the outer being the 56?
No, what? No, not that big. How about like 30?
Well, it would be, I guess, well, 56 is a right of way, so it would be a 36-foot wide road area.
Could we compromise on like a 30?
If we're already redlining one line at one side of the street, I mean, even your hillside ordinance, your street sections for hillside ordinance is only 32 feet. So if we're redlining one side of the street, we're automatically eliminating basically the use of 8 feet of that area. 8 from 32 is 24, and that's what we've got here.
When you redline once, you're eliminating 20 feet. You're eliminating 20 feet, not 8 feet, it's 20 feet. So you're only ending up with 4 feet left, which, like I said, now requires, it's gonna have to both sides be painted red.
Well, then you'll probably need to change your hillside street typical section then, because if you start out with 32 feet and you minus off 8 feet for parking on both sides, you're only going to have 16 feet for the 2 drive lanes. That means engineering will have to change their section.
But there's a difference between a street standard and then what we're calling now the fire lane, because you're not developing this to the street standard. It's it's becoming a fire lane for us to get in and access. It's not a street. It's not a road. Because it doesn't conform to the city standard, it now is the only way we get in there, which is why it's gotta be a minimum of 20 feet.
Well, if we do the red line on one side and we go to 28 feet on that spine road, then we've got parking on one side and no parking on the other, and we have 20 feet left. Does that sound reasonable, Javier? 28 feet?
Yeah, yeah, the math works out as long as that just but it'll be privately enforced since it's an HOA.
Absolutely.
So,
But that would give us the width, namely fires with 10-foot lanes each way plus 8 foot of parking. And that's where our standard comes from, 10, 10, 8, and 8 for a 36-foot wide. So yeah, as long as it's there's enough, whether it's paintings, markings, signage on the one side, I think that extra width would really go a long way to better serve this area. Fire, that sound like something that would work for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you expand that and you leave me the 20 foot that they're not allowed to park and it's clearly denoted as such and you've got
on
that.
both sides, you want red on both sides
Well,
or white on
if
one?
you're talking about increasing it, that will allow for an area of parking that won't encroach on the 20 feet, then yeah, I'm not gonna require it. Now, if you're gonna keep those center ones less, then absolutely both sides on the center.
But we could go back
If you're
down
gonna
to,
ring that with a 28 footer.
if we redline both of the center streets, then we could go back to 20 feet there.
He just asked, Greg, I think you said if we redline the internal streets, both sides,
Yeah.
leaving them at 24 and having the backbone at 28, will that work for fire?
Well, but if it's a fire lane street, then it only needs to be 20 feet, correct? So the two center ones could, if they're redlined on both sides, that could go back down to 20, and that gives us an extra 4 that we can use on the outside.
Because I'm putting it on the homeowners association initially to not have any parking.
Right.
If they see it, they need to enforce it. So there needs to be someone there who says, hey, we're calling it, actually, what would be best is under the California Vehicle Code, the homeowners association can enter into a tow company agreement and post the signage, and then the tow company can just drive through there, and whenever they find the vehicles there, they just tow them. Nobody even has to be involved with the tow company. And the homeowners
That's a good idea.
association. It allows them to do that, so long as it's a local company and their storage lot is within like 10 miles. They can enter into an agreement, and then their information is posted on the sign with the Porterville Police
When
Department.
things get slow.
So
they
when
can
people
drive
call and
through.
say, hey, my car was stolen, they're like, no, actually, the tow company called us, you parked in the fire lane.
Yeah, question.
Just-
Okay, so now we've come to an agreement where 28 on the outside, 20's on the inside. 20,
20's on the inside,
24s.
28 on the outside.
Yeah.
28
20 on the
has the
inside.
ring.
Yeah, got
Yeah,
that.
20
Has the
on the
backbone?
Inside with both,
Got it.
both, are both red line.
Yeah,
And we're only
20 on the
redlined on
inside,
one side, on
28
the
we're
outside.
redlined.
28 on the backbone. Reds on the 20s. Got it. That was a long way to get there, but we got there.
Great.
Yeah, so that's
And we've got the extra parking now that we didn't have before. That's makes it easier to redline some of those areas.
so yeah, so for engineering, so getting past that, Newcomb and River Springs will be developed per city standards, and it'll be with offset sidewalks, and of course, street lighting through there.
28 words.
The only comment I had are a couple comments on the lots that back onto the river would be, again, just taking into account the floods of last year and how important access was. There'd be requests from engineering and public works that access road be within or inside of outside of the floodplain, you know, because the road wouldn't do any good if it's underwater, and that line there being the floodplain limit.
I kind of anticipated that question. Javier went out this morning and I became a amateur surveyor.
Mhm.
Brought some pictures or sent some pictures in to Oscar to try to take a look at this. To give you a little, for instance, because I know that stability of that area after, and last year was a 500-year flood, if I'm not correct. Is that correct?
Close to, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first picture that I took. This is an existing road. Mike Knight can verify all this and everything else, but this is a road that's down below the area. We're approximately 90 feet to the south of the very end point of where the east lot would be, that little triangle lot on the end. And as you can see, the channel of the river has moved in some areas probably 200 feet. So I'm just wanting everybody to take that into consideration as we go forward with this, that in all actuality, stability and access really shouldn't be as big of a concern as it was before the flood came, because now the channel is completely moved. And I guess unless there's another flood like we had last year in the next 500 years, we don't have to worry about it. This was further down. This is down around the middle of the lots where we built. You can see a little bit more how the channel has moved south. And I like I say, I spoke to Mike Knight about it. He said he was working with FEMA, I guess, and that they were working on maps, I guess, to see how the river has changed.
Oscar, can I share my screen?
Hey, Mike, yes, of course. Michael Knight.
Oh, good.
He joined us.
Nice to join us.
Sorry, I was detained in another meeting, so apologize for being late.
Go ahead, Mike.
So in an effort to kind of look at this, yeah, the channel did shift south, but it also shifted north. So I've kind of overlaid your map, and then without having survey data, with just aerial, define this hard line of where the drop off has occurred, but not really taking into consideration elevations. I know we had water above the red line, but the red line was kind of the erosion area. So these sandbars were connected points at times before we experienced those flows. I will say, you know, just so I can put it out there, and I think we've talked about this, Greg, in our conversation. FEMA has taken the stance that this is a natural waterway, and there's not much the city can do to maintain any of this, and we can only maintain city property. And in our conversations with the State Water Board, they are going, in any environmental review, they're going to have strong comments as it relates to any development that is adjacent to the riverbanks. It was a very contentious conversation with the Rio Vista area through the flood event. because we lost almost 300 feet of bank there. So as we talk about the road is one discussion, so access is one discussion. But I would be prepared if this is proposed moving forward. Any efforts to establish that road around the perimeter of this development will probably trigger the requirement from state comments to shore up any erosion potential in the future from actually encroaching on these properties. So would probably be looking at riprap material to be able to strengthen that for future storms. So, I mean, I just say that it's mostly information, but you know, I told you I would look at it, and so this was my effort and evaluation. We've not received a lot of positive feedback from FEMA as it relates to their support in maintaining the channel. And the state has voiced a lot of concern in any proposed development in a response to the storm that we've just experienced. So just as we talked about that, that will be the challenge in ensuring that the road that is developed there is protected and not subject to being washed away.
Great, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. So when we talk about the fire road, the fire department has talked about needing 20 feet access around the backside of the lots. That needs to be out of the floodway line. Then it needs to be 20 feet onto our property, not on the floodway.
I won't make that determination. I mean, it's going to depend on what your property provides you the ability to construct and to protect, I guess, you know. So once this goes through a review process, Javier, I don't know how this gets shipped up to water boards with its proximity to the river channel, but I know any permitting that we do, they come out and do a visual site inspection and provide comment. So that sounds like that would be a choice on your side, depending on what the grading would allow and the ability of control and stabilization of that existing road.
Right, yeah, and it's a couple mix of things. You know, soil borings would be helpful to see, you know, what that stability looks like, and then at a minimum, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board gets involved. Obviously, if something's within the floodplain, but even because of the last storms, with anything adjacent, it'd be worth reaching out to them to see if they don't have conditions for you, because you know, it'd be better to inform them and then find that nothing's required or something minimally is required, rather than move forward thinking there is no issue, and then they're gonna get all bent out of shape because they're gonna deem something a violation and then put the project through a ringer to, you know, just crazy documentation, applications to fill out, fees to pay, and all that could have been avoided if some discussion would have been had.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but and so that was that comment. Is the initial thought would be, you know, the access road be outside the floodplain limits, and like Mike stated, analyzing the stability of the soil there for so that it isn't an erosion potential.
Well, I guess that's the part that I'm looking at dollar signs on is, do we really actually need that, since the channel has moved to the south? I mean, this area didn't erode at all, and it's still a part of all the same area.
And I think that could be,
I mean, if it was on the north side of River Springs, it wouldn't be an issue, but it's on the south side.
right.
So.
And I think that's where the gathering soil borings, putting some maps together where the floodplain line is, where your development lands, and that, and then putting it before the state agency or agencies that, getting the feedback from as far as what they're comfortable with as well. And I think that'd be the first step. And then if you hear from them that, well, we're gonna require this and that, then it's a decision to see if the improvements are worth developing that area.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Any other comments on the project from our Public Works Director?
Again, apologize for being late, and I thought I turned my camera on earlier, so my apologies for not having my camera on. Did we talk about refuse service within the development already? And I just missed it?
Yes.
We did.
Yeah, what it's looking like, Mike, is that the developer's favorable to increasing the U-shaped road, that backbone road at 28 feet with no parking on one side, no parking on the two internal ones, and reducing down to 20. And that way we have two 10-foot travel lanes at all times, and then 8 feet of parking at least on that backbone.
And the only reason why I ask is I noticed that, we show staging areas for cans, and I recall we took that into consideration in previous discussions. I think there was another development that was shared that showed each address has a designated spot. I just want to provide, insight. So through our rate analysis study, council asked us to consider a number of things, and one is based around the operation. And so when they asked us to do that, they want us to evaluate a single day service and a multi-day, so 2-day service. And currently we operate as a 3-day service throughout the city. We are still working towards that. We are trying to get a vendor on to do a GIS realignment of our routes and provide us that final analysis on what would be the most efficient route service for the community. So I just want to advise that we could find ourselves at some point where the city no longer operates at a 3-day service, and at a 2-day service, you're looking at least doubling the cans on one of the days of service. And if the city was to elect to go to single-day service, then you would be tripling the cans in those locations. So just want to say that as we look at this development and looking for any future impacts for consideration moving forward.
So would you then be proposing to go to a double can like they have in Visalia, where the I don't know if it's yard cutting and recycle is in the same can, but it's split in two or something?
So they're in the process of phasing those out. So Cal Recycle has a standard of can for service, and those have been an issue because of the commingling of materials. And those are not recommended for service. So it would be just as our residential or multifamily services are now, would be a single can for green waste or organics, a blue recycle can, and a general waste can. That's why generally when something is developed of this nature, this tight, then it goes to a commercial bin service. And I know that was not amenable to the development, but that's why we encourage that, because it reduces the amount of impact of the number of cans to service and the frequency of traffic by refuse trucks on the private property.
Well, I can make a suggestion here, and that is that, since all of the yard waste will be maintained by the landscaper and they haul it off-site, that's one can that we don't have to have in this neighborhood.
So the whole complex will be served by a landscaper? The whole development is gonna have a landscaper for every lot?
Lot one landscaper will be hired by the HOA to maintain all the landscaping for lots 1 through 42 only in the private drive area. The second thing that I would say is that we started out at Garden Court Villas with smaller cans because we actually, when we built those back in 2008 and 9, we actually had trash compactors. Some people used them, some people didn't. Some people didn't know what to do with them, I guess. And they called refuse, and refuse brought them out bigger cans. So there is the opportunity that by staying with the smaller cans, and refuse not bringing out the larger cans, that they'll use their trash compactors.
Even though there's going to be a landscaper, the part of the green waste is supposed to be food scraps. So having a development, you will still have to have the green bins for food. That's part of Cal Recycle's new mandates.
How are you guys going to enforce that?
We already are.
We already are.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It comes down to route reviews that we have to report to the state, as well as fines for not using the correct cans.
So where is the food waste being required? I know it's required on restaurants at this point, but is it being required in any residential areas now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Yes, every residential home is required to have a green can, and all apartment buildings are required to have green bins also.
We went to a festival in, I think it was Hanford, and they were handing out these cute little green things to keep on your counter to put your scraps in and then take them out to the green can.
Yeah, it's statewide. It's not just here. It's all over.
And Cal Recycle's enforcement is becoming more and more strict, removing tolerances. And you know, we were of an interpretation of the regulation that we could waive an enclosure as a result of being self-hauled. So if you were required to have a 3-bin enclosure, for example, and you had a organics waiver, we interpreted that you wouldn't have to build the enclosure. However, Cal Recycle has provided us additional clarification, and even though they have a waiver, they still have to have a enclosure to accommodate that use in the future.
Well, again, I revert back to the idea of going with the smaller cans in this development, and as long as city refuse cooperates and doesn't bring out larger cans, our folks can abide by that.
Well, and the struggle with that is the rate of waste, right? So you can initially design for a smaller can. However, if the waste stream at that residence is greater than what that can accommodate, then we run into the issue of overloaded cans, and debris in the roadway, those type of things. And the customer has the ability to dictate what size can they want to pay for. So along those lines, we would need to anticipate the most amount of impact versus the least amount of impact. But I'm sure we'll work through it. I mean, this is the first development that's stood fast on this type of service. with this densely populated within the city, so it will be a challenge, but if the HOA is performing at your expectations, then hopefully it will be successful. I just know we're not so lucky to get everybody to to do what's expected. We struggle with that on a day-to-day basis with the operation.
I agree with that on my end too.
Well, there's some people that stay home a lot more than I do, but I mean, we're lucky if my wife and I put out our black can every third week. I say every 2 weeks, but we have gone as long as 3 weeks without even putting it out there, so.
Yeah, then we have people who have, 2 or 3 black cans because they have so much trash.
Yeah, I suppose if this was a senior project, then we wouldn't even be discussing this because it's very
Right.
rare single. And that's the thing, our experience with Garden Court Villas is that we have doctors, nurses, people in the medical industry that are gone on 10 and 12-hour shifts that are hardly ever home. Other young couple professionals, middle-aged couples, but typically we don't have a lot of children, really. We don't have a lot of children. We don't, even though we have the playground there and the park and the pool, the percentage of households with children is much lower than a regular neighborhood. I guess I'm saying smaller households, smaller trash production.
And I think it's just important to note, you know what I mean? It's just the challenges. Appreciate that. Sorry being late.
Oh, good, thank you, Michael. Are there any other comments, from the city representative on the project?
Yes. Front. Can we just go over the front and back side setbacks? They're 5.
What's that?
The setbacks.
Oh, yeah,
The
that's what we
minimum-
discussed earlier about.
Minimum front yard setback for the house itself is 15 feet. But if there's a porch aspect to the housing, the porch could be at 10 feet. Yeah, minimum interior side is 5 feet.
Yep.
Minimum rear is 5 feet.
I think the main thing is as long as we're 20 feet from behind the behind the street with the garage is one of the main things, right? 20 feet.
Covered parking, minimum 20 feet from, at front loading. Side loading could be.
But in a
minimum
PUD,
15.
we can, that's what I was saying, that we may be asking for variances of front yards and floor area coverage and stuff like that, so. But we didn't want to get into that detail until we got past this.
Sounds
But
good.
but I'm sure we could submit all of that information with the tentative map.
With the application,
Yeah.
yes. With that, any other questions?
So are we on a revise and proceed?
Yes, we'll provide a letter outlining today's meeting, updating each department's comments. And then we'll try to get that as soon as possible. It may be up to 2 weeks to get that out. But yeah, once we make those revisions, we'll resubmit and proceed.
So we have a resubmit, not a revise and proceed.
As long as we comply with each department's conditions, we should be good to move forward.
Okay. Okey dokey.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just put that down there.
That was the third item for project review committee. I do want to open this time for oral communications. If there's this is the opportunity for any members of the public to address the committee on any matter pertaining to project review.
We better not. No, he doesn't look
I've
like
only
it.
been here a week, so.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like it. I know he does.
More than helpful than that. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Again, this is the opportunity for any members of the public to address the committee
Thank
on
you.
any matter pertaining to today's project review.
My line says I'm slow. but we're
Now I'm gonna go ahead and close oral communication. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and end today's project review committee at 3:02 PM. And we will open Parks and Map Committee. We're gonna go ahead and start Parks and Map Committee at 3:03 PM. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and do roll call here from city staff. We are joined by Claudia Calderon, the zoning administrator, and also the acting community development director. We're joined by myself, Oscar Cepeda, the associate planner. We're also joined by Jeff O'Neill, the city planner. We're also joined by Javier Sanchez, the engineering and project management director. And we're also joined by Clayton Dignam, our fire marshal. And also joined by Sarah Torres from our engineering department. With that, for Parcel Map Committee, I'm gonna go ahead and open oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the committee on any matter pertaining to Parcel Map Committee.
Okay, I'm back, sorry.
Is that your oral comment?
I think you've heard my oral comments before.
Pulling up the map, I can share. All right, since we did not hear any comments from the public, we're gonna go ahead and close oral communications. So for today's Parcel Map Committee, we do have one item, which is tentative parcel map 2024-002. Tentative parcel map to divide the existing property, about 0.61 acre property into two total parcels. Parcel one being 12,844 plus or minus square feet. Parcel two being 12,843 square feet. The subject property is located on the north side
It
of
was somebody
Lomita.
trying to return Mr. Turtle, period. It was somebody trying to return Mr. Turtle.
I would read him.
Who's
He's
that?
talking- I think he's talking to someone else, maybe. Yes.
There it goes.
Guess he's gonna get a whole bunch of shipments of Mr. Turtles.
So yeah, so the property is located on the north side of La Vida Avenue, west of La Vida Street. I mean, west of Villa Street. Within the RS2 zone district and have the general plan land use of low density residential. As far as the project, or the analysis of the project, the proposed tentative parcel map does meet the development standards for that zone district. However, after the dedication, it puts the length of the parcel at 176, right? Which is 2 feet above the maximum 2.5 times of the width. However, the development code does have a section under 400.05, the authority to vary regulations, which allows a minor exception as it pertains to tentative maps. In this case, the lot depth is being 2 feet above the maximum, in which our zoning administrator has made a determination that is still compatible to what our code requirements are and would not be subject to a conditional use permit. As
We
far-
just need to apply for the variance, but no
No
CUP.
variance, we'll just outline that in the resolution. That there is an exception and only when it's a minor exception, in this case, 2 feet. If it was 5, 10 feet, then they would have to go through a further review. As far as the environmental review of the project, it could be an exemption under minor land division, which our zoning administrator has made that determination, and will file a notice of exemption to the state clearinghouse and file it with the recorder. So as far as the recommendation, it's for open up parcel map committee for discussion.
Yeah,
For a vote.
thank you, Oscar, and my apologies for the turtle comments. I was trying to take care of some business. In any case, since the zoning administrator is not present, generally that role gets delegated to the city planner for the purposes of the parcel map committee. So we've heard staff's presentation of the information. Do any of the parcel map committee members have any questions right now?
Not at this time.
Okay. So then at this point, we will conduct the public hearing. So this hearing is now open to the public for any comment in favor of, opposed to, or otherwise regarding this proposed tentative parcel map. Hearing none. Oscar, is anybody present either physically or online that wants to make a comment?
There is one person present, but no comment.
Okay. Then hearing and seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the committee for a motion on the map.
I'll make a motion to approve the map as submitted.
Very good. Is there a second? I will go ahead and second if there is not another second on the motion. So we have a motion and a second to approve. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 3-0. So then we will provide you, staff will provide you with a resolution indicating the parcel maps approval of the tentative map.
I don't want to say nothing or start nothing. Just, again, I'd like to get more information than last from the fire standpoint. It'll be like the previous comments. When you start to develop, this is when things will be triggered to comply with the codes.
Well, thank you. With that, we're gonna go ahead and end today's parcel map committee at 3:11 p.m. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.